Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of Planet Critical, the podcast for a world in crisis. My name is Rachel Donald. I'm a climate corruption journalist and your host. Last week, I interviewed activist and author Max Wilbert about, bright green lies, essentially how the environmentalist movement is kind of falling prey to capitalism, how there is a lot of nonsense in the movement that is just a greenwashing bid to continue business as usual, such as electric vehicles, and how the real solution, of course, is systemic change and what to do about it. Max has been an activist since he was 12 and has spent many years debunking the mainstream environmentalist movement in a range of articles and his book, Bright Green Lies. So I highly suggest you go and listen to the episode. It was so much fun speaking with Max. We saw eye to eye on most things, if not everything. And so it was just sort of this wonderful tennis match of two people getting excited about finding a kindred spirit and complaining about all of the things that we find extremely annoying, if not outright dangerous, about environmentalism and how it has been co-opted by capitalism, it seems. The thing that I want to touch on, though, in this bonus episode is technology. And it's what he says at the very, very end of the episode. And it's actually been a couple of weeks since I recorded the interview with Max. Normally, I record the bonus straight after. And listening back to it again today has made me really want to get into what is technology and why technology is actually useful. Another movement in the environmental space tends to be techno-optimism, that everything will work out fine because we'll just figure out what to do. Technology will save us. Obviously, that doesn't really combat the whole, we have finite resources on a finite planet. So technology also needs to figure out how to become more sustainable and long-term. And it essentially demands an entire paradigm shift about how we make things and the reason for which we make things. And a sustainable world would be about making things that last and making things that can be repaired, not making things that are only to create profit or deliberately break or become redundant after a year or two. So I think it's really, really important to get into what is technology and how it's not being adequately wielded because of the economic paradigm, and to kind of hit home that tech is our friend. Tech exists to ameliorate human life. Our first technology was fire. Another formative one was the wheel. We would not be where we are today. We wouldn't have this level of education, of existence, of art, literature, all these amazing things without technology. So to write off technology as this dangerous weapon that is going to hoover up all of the resources in the world is quite an extreme perspective. And I think one that I have been guilty of venturing into without actually knowing enough about technology. So I went away and looked up the dictionary definition. As a literature student, that's always where you start. And technology is the application of scientific knowledge to the practical aims of human life. So there's nothing inherently bad in that. There's actually lots of good stuff in that. Technology is very, very useful. And if the aim of human life is to ameliorate the human condition for everybody and to live sustainably, then technology will be the thing that we need to figure this out. I do not believe that we should just accept that the planet cannot feed 8 billion people or 10 billion or whatever. Like, we absolutely should be putting all of our resources into figuring out how to support our population and our ecosystems and the living species that we share this planet with, rather than saying it's just not possible. And tech is kind of the way that we will do that. It is the only way that we will do that, really. Figuring out how to support this many people and how to take a custodian view of our role in this world. Indigenous populations often manage it. They are custodians and stewards of the land that they live in tandem with and live off of. When you have a population that's 8 billion and you need to do that on a global scale, you are going to need technology to do that. and therefore repairing our relationship with technology as scientific knowledge that we use to ameliorate human life, um, or to improve the practical aims of human life might just be the fundamental, I don't know, value shift or paradigm shift or whatever that we need to get through. And obviously, it demands kind of the undoing of capitalism, which is a whole other problem that I speak about a lot on this show. But being suspicious of technology from the off, as I have been, and that's not to say that Max is, it's just that we talked about technology at the very end, and it's really been something on my mind since, because he said technology is also stories, it's communication, learning how to live sustainably, passing down information from one generation to another. That is all technology. And it's absolutely true. He says that is the highest form of technology, passing down the information that allows people to live sustainably. And I completely agree. I think what's also really important is that the technology that will allow us to live sustainably and that gets passed down generations is also going to be high level technology. It's going to be extremely modern technology. Um, and we need to invest in the advancement of technology in order to be able to pass down the correct knowledge to future generations so that they can also continue to improve, you know, their practical aims for human life and the existence of their communities. And I think what's really important is that we have to understand that technology shapes our own existence. And what I mean by that is, as we continue to invest in technology that will allow for a better world, and I understand that I'm kind of taking power and capitalism out of the equation here, but um, I really do think that there is a sort of need to repair our relationship with tech as a concept right now. Maybe this is just for me, maybe just my relationship with tech. But as the world will look different, people will also look different. Citizens will also look different. Investing in technology will also allow our citizens to organize differently. It will create an entirely different world. And what I mean by that is we're not substituting technology, i.e., we're not electrifying our fossil fuel economy and expecting it to be exactly the same. The whole point of tech and our relationship with tech is it changes our ways of organizing and our existence. So the beautiful thing and the amazing thing about the idea of creating a sustainable future is that it will allow for us to exist completely differently, and it will allow for different kinds of social, political, artistic innovations that currently maybe we cannot see because we don't have the tech to, we don't have the time to, or we don't have the capacity for right now. So there's techno-optimism that we don't really need to worry about anything because the scientists will just figure out what to do and we will substitute everything, and tech will be the answer to all of our problems. There's techno-pessimism, which is, tech is part of the problem. And then I think we need technorealism to understand that technology in and of itself is not a problem. It's the aims of people who wield technology that is problematic. So the fact that huge amounts of resources go into figuring out how to make websites more addictive or social media more addictive so that people stay on and generate more profit for ad revenue and like that's just shitty. That's not the problem. Is not technology in and of itself. The problem is people in positions of power making decisions that do not benefit their community. I think what's interesting is that technology is often the counterforce to bad tech, to tech that harms us. Whilst you've got the people in the world that are trying to figure out how to hook under 10s to Instagram for kids, you've also got web developers who are releasing apps for free that allow you to manage your time on your smartphone or encourage you to delete things or just actually overall improve your relationship with technology. So the problem isn't tech, it's people. I think a really fantastic example of this that is so particular and crucial to the climate crisis is nuclear. So nuclear energy is amazing. It's fairly clean. The amount of nuclear waste that one person would generate in their lifetime if they just use nuclear energy is like this amount of uranium. And had we invested in nuclear 30 years ago, we wouldn't be in the position that we are in now with the climate crisis. A really great example of this is France, who pushed through and built a bunch of nuclear reactors, and they use so much less fossil fuels than any other Western country. It is amazing. Their carbon footprint is just so small compared to UK, USA, etc. So the reason that nuclear didn't go ahead was because there were a couple of, explosions, problems at nuclear reactors. But the amount of people that actually died in those incidents is so tiny, so tiny compared to, I don't know, the amount of people that die by cars every year or whatever. And we don't take cars off the road, even though we should for a whole bunch of reasons. It's negligible. The danger of nuclear is negligible. But because of that, because there were a couple of problems, and also obviously because of nuclear bombs and the fear around nuclear and nuclear war, everything got conflated. So the technology got conflated with the politics. And the technology of one thing, energy got conflated with the technology of bombs. And so we rejected the cleanest form of energy that we have because we didn't think critically enough about what each piece of the puzzle meant. We villainized the technology rather than warmongering geopolitics. And this is something else Max mentions right at the end of the episode. He talks about the trauma of being descended from colonizers. So for white people, the fact that we have ancestors who committed genocide for generations and generations, that will affect our epigenetics. That will create a pathology in whiteness, who still, rule the world with these iron fists. And it will create a sort of normal that is not at all normal. So rather than, I think this example of nuclear and geopolitics is really, really interesting. So rather than correctly pointing the finger at the instability of geopolitics because of the inability or unwillingness to build bridges, to collaborate, to form a global community, to work with rather than against, to be willing to give up some of the power in this zero-sum power game that geopolitics creates. Rather than doing all of that, which would have allowed us to have clean energy, we blamed the technology because there's just this history of unwillingness to admit that we were wrong. And when I say we, I mean, the descendants of empire. This is something my friends and I speak about in terms of the difference between our generation, millennials and Gen Z, and boomers, and this kind of fear about admitting or learning about what the empire did wrong, because that would completely change their worldview. Our entire national identity in Britain and in the USA is these kind of incredible torchbearers of progress and freedom over there. And the world is better off in a sense because of the colonial mission. We spread science, we spread rationality, we spread knowledge or whatever. And there seems to be just almost this inability in so many people to admit that what the things that were done were so unjust. And perhaps the unwillingness is because that completely attacks not only their worldview, but their identity. There is this pathology of Western exceptionalism, that what we do is always okay. And in a sense, it's for the greater good, that we have the right to do things for the greater good, that we are the commanders of the greater good, that we understand the greater good in a way that nobody else can. And so to admit that maybe we would have a problem with managing our own nuclear energy because we have fundamentally unstable politics that were built on a tradition of imperialism, dominance, control, genocide, would be to ruin the very illusion that attempts to keep the world in an iron grip. So it was easier to blame the technology than to admit that we are fallible and capable of doing wrong. Technorealism is so important. Technology is not a problem in and of itself. Technology advances human existence. The repression of scientific knowledge by the fossil fuel companies, for example, has led to technology causing problems in our natural world. Had we done something about it when all of that information was available in the 60s and 70s, rather than lobbying companies keeping it out of public discourse, again, the world wouldn't be where we are today. We would have created technology to deal with the problem. We have created technology to deal with the problem. And I think what is so important about that definition, the application of scientific knowledge to the practical aims of human life, is if we can get out of the imperial mindset that creates a dominance, a hierarchy of whiteness being the most important form of human life, then we can start to trust in technology in a sense. We can allow for that mind that needs to exist to procure certain resources that we need, certain materials that we need to create this technology that benefits everybody. And we will trust that that mind is in a good place, good positioning or whatever, because it's improving everybody's life. It's about the practical aims of human life, not just white life. That means, for example, being really clear about what we're using resources for, i.e., not for mad entertainment and tools that break down every few years, but for conscious reasons, and therefore having less minds, less extractive forces in the world, and never on indigenous lands, for example. Tech can be used to improve all life. Technorealism means not rejecting the very thing that could be used to navigate our way through this process, as long as we stick to the true definition of what it is, the practical aims of all human life, not just some life. That's enough from me this week, but I'm going to keep chewing on this. Thanks for tuning in with me this week. If you're new here, remember to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you can also go to planetcritical.com to learn more. If you want to support the project, you can do so with a paid subscription at planetcritical.com or on Patreon. Both the links are in the description box below. As always, a huge thank you to the Planet Critical community who support the project and keep this project going. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope this was valuable in some way, and I will see you next week.